I would say on the individual level, in the global north, in developed economies, we are currently at perhaps maybe about a B minus, C plus, depending on the circumstances. For the group context, I think we might be at like a D or D plus, because most of what we're going to talk about today are unconscious cues. They're things that are going underneath the hardware that we feel, the matter of experience that we feel on the level of behavior and how we tap into our thoughts and emotions to think that we are experiencing one thing when in fact there's all these things going on underneath the surface. So at the group level, the big mismatch, when I use this term evolutionary mismatch, we can return to it again, but it's the idea, the central challenge here is that we evolved for the past. We evolved for how things were. We didn't evolve for how things are. And this applies to all organisms on the planet. And the scary thing is that when an organism is going into a state of evolutionary mismatch, it usually is the precursor to extinction. It means that the environment is outpacing the biological capacity for that organism to be adaptive and to survive and to reproduce, right? Which is the definition of evolutionary fitness. So on the individual level, I'll give a great example here. So let's talk about circadian physiology. This is something that I think is probably the lowest hanging fruit in these, the kinds of places that I would give this talk, the lowest hanging fruit for the most bang for buck if we get this right as a species and as organizations. So we have an incredibly dynamic environment. Our ancestors and their ancestors before them, going back 3.5 billion years, have been constantly exposed to light and temperature oscillation in their environment. We're in a situation in the past 100 years where that's no longer the case. So right now we're sitting in this wonderfully, it's -7 outside. So wonderfully temperature regulated and light regulated environment. But it's basically masking and bludgeoning our inherent biological cues to understand how to cue our behavior and cognition and physiology to its environment. And there are massive consequences to this. So an exploration of circadian physiology, that is where I would potentially take it on the individual level. And that's why I would say our lack of understanding of this is giving us a low B in terms of our grade. Now, moving on to the group level. With groups, one of the biggest challenges, why I gave such a poor grade, is because one of the biggest challenges that we have, especially in the 21st century, is that of how to properly frame our identities. Identity, it turns out, identity is one of the most powerful drivers that shape our perception of veridical reality, of our perception of truth, of what reality actually is out there. So the way we identify with groups is going to bleed into things like workplace satisfaction, sense of belonging, all of which are massive predictors for a good, positive workspace for employees or for people part of a club or an organization. And then, of course, we evolved in very specific group sizes through space-time for the past 1.8 million years. And if you don't adhere to what we call scaling laws of human group sizes, you can do massive disservice to human potential if you're not paying attention to these scaling laws. So I think that is much less known science, both on the organizational level and the societal level, and the details of which are emerging, which if we properly pay attention to, we can really do a lot of good for group level human wellness and performance.